cold open question for the Tuesday, July 16th episode of the Just Basketball Show. Three-man weave edition today, me, Brendon, Wes. I mean, you guys were both in Las Vegas, and I was, watching at home. So I wanted to just ask you guys, and I have an answer for this, but it's, I think you guys have better answers because you were there. What's the best thing you saw at Summer League?
Brendon, you go first.
Or random.
Talking on the court. I had an unusual summer. I think Wes and I both were not there for long enough. I feel like this year there was no marquee attraction. It felt like a quiet version of Summer League this year, in my personal opinion. There was no game everyone wanted to see. There wasn't really like NBA-wide news still going on, which can sometimes be like the fun of it. You're like seeing everybody's reaction when they get their little push notification in real time out in the stands. Like, it just felt like it came and went, but I'll just go on the court. I really liked the number 1 versus number 2 game. It was late on Friday. It actually ended up being a really good game between the Hawks and the Wizards. Ricochet and Sarr both showed some stuff. Both teams had like competent 1 through 5 lineups that made it feel like an actual basketball game rather than like a high school showcase, which is what sometimes Summer League can be. So I don't know. I doubt anyone watched it on TV. I can tell you for a fact no one stayed in that arena, despite it being the number 1 and number 2 picks. But I did just enjoy seeing those guys. I hadn't seen a lot of them. They're kind of, anonymous players as far as draft picks are concerned, and I felt pretty good about both of them. So it's a normie pick, but there you go.
Best thing I saw the entire weekend was a pool. It was 118 degrees in Las Vegas. I went in the pool on a Sunday morning.
Nice.
The pool bar was open at 9:30 in the morning. That was
my deodorant melted in my car driving from Phoenix to Vegas. It was a pool of liquid when I opened it up.
Are we sure we should be like going to Las Vegas anymore? Like when you say stuff like that,
well, Chris, I live in the place that also would have melted it. The first half of my drive was where I reside, so I can't avoid Vegas and solve that problem.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you need to like move somewhere where like you can like have deodorant that doesn't melt. That's like really like just a question for you now. It's tough.
Well, I don't know. You people in Cleveland deal with freezing temperatures 2 months out of the year.
Builds character. 2 months. 2 months. Wes, it's like a lot more than 2 months.
It's freezing for more than 2 months? Like it's like actively snowing for longer than 2 months?
Yeah, I'll get snow in like April, May.
Not consistently though. Like you're not like living through those conditions in May, are you? I mean,
no, but
you don't live in Antarctica.
No, but it could be like a week where you get snow and it's so cold and it's like you're like wearing a winter jacket when you're walking to work. Yeah.
I'd rather be in 100 degrees. Me and Brendon are team south of the Mason-Dixon here. I mean, it's
it's
95 degrees in Miami, and I feel like I've cooled off since I've come back from Vegas.
Not the south of the Mason-Dixon was not a phrase I ever expected any of us to use on the Just Basketball Show, if I'm being honest. I'll just say my 2 best things I saw. Mattis Buzelis' dunk and the way he like owned it afterwards with kind of selling it was pretty great. And then the Zaire Smith dunk for the Cavs over the weekend. Just 2 really good in-game Summer League dunks.
Keyshawn Johnson from the Heat had a really good one against in the Heat Celtics game too. There have been some good dunks.
Yeah, Summer League when you can take that. None of us said Bronny, which tough, but let me ask you guys on the ground. We're not going to talk about him today, but did that from the outside felt like the thing people in Vegas were like.
It's not even
that
close.
Was like
that's
that
the
was
only
like
reason anyone was there. I mean, I said it was a quiet weekend. The only time it didn't feel that way was the game on Friday where he competed against the Rockets, which I think we'll get to. But
we do. Yeah, that's true. We'll get to that.
Anytime LA has a player worth caring about, Summer League gets a little busier for that 2-hour chunk. But Wes, you missed that game, right? Were you there?
I showed up because my flight got delayed in. I showed up for the end of the second quarter, I think. Or I showed up like right at halftime, so I got the second half of it.
Better than nothing. All right, coming up on today's show, we've got a whole bunch of takes to get off. We're going to try a little new structure for this. We each have a take we're going to present, go through it, and we're going to talk about Lawrence Frank talking about Kawhi Leonard and Team USA. That's coming up today on the Just Basketball Show. What is up, everyone? Welcome into the Just Basketball Show, your show covering all things basketball. It's NBA, WNBA, Olympics, Summer League, everything and more and in between. This week, just 2 episodes. The way the calendar's looking, we're going to do 2 jam-packed episodes this week instead of our normal 3, but still bringing you the most content we can here. We want to remind you to follow, rate, review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel, and check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. Support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use code JustBasketball. You get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how it works. Step 1, you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager in any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. Guys, let's start talking about Kawhi and the Clippers. Lawrence Frank, in discussing Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers offseason moves, said that a little bit of disappointment, I think, in some of these things. Said, quote, if there wasn't a new CBA, Steve would pay everyone, was another quote, really, I think, hammering home the idea that the CBA had an impact on what the Clippers did this summer, or at least the way they're spinning it. But also said that Kawhi is expected to be ready for training camp, and that the Clippers were disappointed in USA Basketball's decision to pivot from Kawhi Leonard. Frank said that Leonard looked good in the first 2 practices and there was no setback. Understood, he said, what Team USA felt like it had to do, but they felt that Kawhi could play. So, whichever one of you wants to jump in here first, what do you make of Lawrence Frank's comments about this and the fact that maybe Kawhi actually could have played for Team USA this summer, in the Clippers' opinion?
First of all, I don't buy that he was disappointed that he wasn't playing for the Olympics.
Yeah, nobody
buys that, right?
Yeah. No. That's like making good PR with your guy so that he knows publicly you said that. But like the injury risk for Kawhi for the Clippers is like, I mean, I'm sure like Daryl Morey is like another point of comparison here, is probably why every USA basketball game he's probably watching stressed out, wondering, just hoping Joel Embiid gets up every time he falls.
Right. It's the same reason why the Mavericks are probably internally pretty happy that Luka Doncic's team got eliminated before these Olympics started too. So, look, maybe I could maybe understand the sense of we were disappointed because we kind of wanted to see Kawhi play healthy for some portion, so we know what he looks like before training camp starts or before the season begins or whatever it is. But, the whole Kawhi leaving, I'm done trying to guess why Kawhi Leonard does anything that's injury related. I don't think that anybody other than Kawhi Leonard knows why he does anything or why he decides something. But this idea that Team USA in their statement about why Kawhi left the team mentioned the Clippers, and then Lawrence Frank came out in an interview and did some cleanup on that and said we actually had nothing to do with that decision. It leads me to think, okay, well, either it was a Team USA decision or it was just a Kawhi Leonard decision. And he said, you know what? I just don't have the juice right now. I'm not going to play. So you can kind of take it in whichever direction. I don't really know what to make of it other than that.
Kawhi, to me, it's been at this point, and I think there's been some like revisionist stories about that Toronto year where maybe that really was just it for him, where he just kind of, I don't know if he knew it in real time, maybe thought it was going to start to get worse after that and just said, he was already hobbled back then. Like, we kind of have turned him into a superhero from that run, and deservedly so. He was awesome. But that was the most kind of significant first load management year where he would just, miss entire games just for rest and things and put that team on his back, wins a championship. Maybe that's just kind of when things change, and the what if every year with the Clippers has just been a little bit unnecessary. Maybe the answer of the what if is kind of always going to be no. I mean, now we know that, but with the decision to even play in the first place, it never felt real. It never. Right. I was sitting there the moment that he got named. I asked people. I saw people with the Clippers who cover the Clippers in Vegas, and I'm like, was this ever going to actually happen, or was it like a we'll see how it goes type of thing? And I guess all of that to say, it is just disappointing. It's a bummer. We're not quite at like Lonzo Ball territory with this guy because he's actually on the court, but we are too like, is he going to be like physically good after his playing career? Is he going to have a comfortable life? How much, like, is he going to play beyond this contract? Like, those are really the questions with Kawhi. So it almost feels trivial to care about the Team USA side of it. But because he wanted to do it, it almost just bums me out more because it's like he can't even have this. He couldn't even be the guy just getting DNPs in Paris for a month. He had to get that like kind of stolen away from him because of his freaking knees as well. It's just kind of a mess and a disappointment all around.
And I think that it's just also reflective of what the Clippers era with him has been. I think that's the kind of the part about this that I think it's home to me from like a symbolism standpoint, right? It's like that because of where this has ended up with him, because of his injuries more than anyone else's, like him getting to win a gold medal and add to his legacy or compete for a championship and add to his legacy in that way, like that just never feels like it's going to be possible. I mean, this has been discussed before, but I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but it's going to be the weirdest Hall of Fame guy ever just because he's relatively compared to other guys that we think of as Hall of Famers, like he's not going to have the resume in the same way, right? Like there's going to be so much time lost to injury, and there's the whole like way he left San Antonio that was weird with the concern about his career, and then he gets the second title in Toronto, and then the Clippers thing happens, and he's like clearly one of the best players of his era, one of the best two-way players I've seen in my lifetime, obviously. But like, and he's gonna, I think, be a Hall of Fame caliber guy. But it's gonna look so weird because like all of it's gonna feel incomplete. He's gonna be like the most incomplete great player we've seen of the last 20 years, I think.
And if he is in the Hall of Fame, what jersey is he wearing? It's
the Clippers.
It's probably. But why? It's
because that's the one he chose, right? Like that's that's the one place where he has decided represents him.
The point being, though, is he is maybe the greatest superstar we've had that has no fan base. Like, who's the fan base for Kawhi Leonard, right? Even LeBron James, for as much team jumping as he's done, Cleveland loves LeBron, right? It doesn't matter. But San Antonio fans kind of have a sour taste in their mouth with the whole Kawhi Leonard experience, the way that thing ended. He's in Toronto for 1 year and wins a championship for them, the only championship they had in franchise history, but he's not a Raptor, and the one to your point, Brendon, the one place he actually chooses, the LA Clippers, has been a complete and utter disaster in his 5 years. Right? He hasn't finished playoff series. It's been an absolute disappointment for that fan base. I don't think that you can look at what this Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era was if you're a Clippers fan and be like, yeah, that was awesome. There's no way.
Yeah,
so it's just it's a weird career for him.
On the Hall of Fame side, I actually don't. I kind of reject that idea. I can't tell you how many minutes half the people in the Hall of Fame played, how many seasons, what their points total, where they rank on the all-time anything. I remember, generally speaking, how long was their peak, some highlight moments, if they won a championship, if they won an MVP trophy. Kawhi has all that. We're going to have the shot, the 65 bounce shot over the Philly to beat Philly. We're going to have, the finals MVP kind of not locking LeBron down, but fighting with LeBron and knocking down big shots.
LeBron saying "fuck" as Kawhi checks back in.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's part of the whole thing.
He has enough of those huge moments where I think right now what's weird about Kawhi's career is living it. Him having been in the Hall of Fame and looking back 15 years after that, I don't think it's going to be odd at all. I think it's going to be like, oh yeah, that was a great player. Won 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, was in that kind of odd player empowerment, big time swing trades every year, every summer era that the 2010s kind of turned into, and then had some injuries. Oh well. It kind of feels like an NFL career is what's come into mind talking about it. It feels like a little bit of like a skill position player in the NBA, in the NFL, where he wins a title, gets a payday, and lasts like 8 years. You know what I mean? It's like it kind of feels like that.
It's like the Odell Beckham of NBA players.
Yeah. That's a good.
Yeah.
That's a good comp. That's a
Sure.
perfect one. The Odell Beckham.
Little
Hurt in
more,
the Super Bowl
little
as
more
well,
yeah, a little
Can we
more
talk a
quiet
little bit
than
then
Odell.
about what this means for the Clippers going forward then, because Paul George is gone. They let him walk for nothing. All these things. I don't know what kind of healthy season we're going to get from Kawhi Leonard. Nobody does. But because they don't have Paul George there anymore, who I thought was like a third team All-NBA guy last year, there's going to be 20 to 30 games that Kawhi Leonard just doesn't play this season. Yeah. And when he's out, it's just going to be James Harden and the Terrence Manns of the Clippers, and that's the roster, right? And so I don't really know what this Clippers team is doing now. They cited the CBA and the reason why they don't bring back Paul George, but it seemed, I don't know, it didn't really hold up in terms of an argument, because then it was, okay, so is the whole point of this to have the best possible team that doesn't touch the second apron and isn't an actual championship contender? It just feels like they're in the middle in the Western Conference there. And I don't really know what the end game is right now for the Clippers, because you re-signed Kawhi Leonard to this 3-year extension. You just re-signed James Harden to a 2-year deal. Is the idea here to just be a mediocre basketball team? Do they think that they're a mediocre basketball team? Or do they think, you know what, it didn't really matter whether or not we had Paul George or not, because our ceiling was always tied to whether or not Kawhi Leonard was healthy anyway. So maybe it doesn't matter. Brendon, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they want to be a better defense, clearly, right? I mean, they have gone out and gotten defensive wings, whether you're talking about Derek Jones. They haven't technically signed Chris Dunn, but they will once they figure out the Russell Westbrook side of things. They brought Nick Batum back. Maybe PJ Tucker plays a little bit more this year and at the very least can, defend the post or whatever. They've gotten rid of a lot of their kind of offensive guards. This team always felt like, they have Bones Highland still, but they might get rid of him as part of all this. Felt like they always had a Lou Williams. They still have a Norman Powell. That's kind of gone. So it feels like they want to basically be a top 10 defense, let their 2 superstars cook, and be decent, be good enough. Maybe, they're kind of starting to get out of the woods with their draft picks. Like by next offseason, they'll have another one available to them. They have some from Philly with the 2028 and 2029 picks that they got back. Wait, that's the wrong direction. Why do they have a 2028 Philadelphia first-round pick? They do.
Harden?
The Harden? That came over maybe with Harden? That doesn't seem.
Yeah, why would it have come with Harden? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, and they have cap space in 2026. That's the best that I can figure. Be as good as you can be. Ride this out. James will be gone by then. Maybe he'll retire or move on. Kawhi will be an expiring contract, and then they'll reshuffle the deck if they can't swing a trade before then. But how much better? On the court, how much better were they really going to be if Paul George had stuck around? Were any of us going to think they could win a title? I guess no. It's embarrassing, but the fall of what they're going to be, what I would pick them to finish in the win-loss column is not going to be significantly different without Paul George. 5 to 8, that's a lot, but it wasn't like they were a 60-win team with him, and they're probably not going to be some kind of 30-win team without him. So they're just going to be, even more in the middle now, but maybe that's kind of what this was going to be either way.
That 2028 pick is going to Philadelphia, according to the real GM.
Got it. I was on the outgoing.
Yeah.
I caught it myself, yeah. So they have a 2030 and a 2031. They'll have a 32.
No picks incoming.
They can start to trade those, next summer if they have all these middling salaries now, Derek Jones and everybody. And maybe there's a trade to be made to get more bigger time talent in the door then, or they just wait till 2026 and try to sign somebody. There were a lot of other teams are, which is just kind of trying to pick their spots.
Or maybe the original sin wasn't necessarily letting Paul George walk, but actually re-signing Kawhi Leonard to that extension in the middle of the year at the highest of highs of their season in January when they looked like a championship team. And I wonder, you mentioned, hey, well, they'll have some more draft picks. Maybe there's some things that they could bring in. Well, what if Paul George was just the first one out? What if the next step is, well, we re-signed Kawhi to that extension. We got James Harden back. We're not going to lose everybody for nothing. 12 months from now, they could just start trading those guys too and completely reshuffle the deck. I don't think anything should be off the table with this team.
Like you said with the extension, real quick, just to agree there.
Yeah.
Kawhi they shouldn't have signed Kawhi unless they were sure they were going to keep George, right? Like it's kind of like both or neither in terms of a direction. If they lost both, then you asked me that question of where they go from here. I would have just said, well, they're kind of tanking. They're kind of resetting. They're rebuilding. But now, it's like they're in the worst of both worlds a little bit.
I mean, even not keeping Russ, I think, is a sign that like there is like going to be some adjustment here. It's like the kinds of things they're doing on the fringe of the roster are also different. Like no Russ coming back, considering what he did for them, and actually looking to move on from him. Like that is all part of.
I mean, won't that make them better? I think some Clippers fans would say that they'll be better getting rid of that guy.
Sure, but I'm not even trying to debate like better or worse necessarily. I'm just saying that like when you don't keep the veteran guy, you're gonna give minutes to like Kevin Porter Jr. and maybe other young guys, or maybe Bones finally gets a chance, whatever that is. Like you're changing the direction of what you are, and I think that's like a devil in the details kind of thing. Like I think that's just it adds to what is going on with Kawhi and Paul and everything. That's my only take there. Clippers. When we get better closer to NBA season, I'm just gonna say that BetMGM, please give me a line of them to like not even be in the play-in. I just want to see I just want to know. Just like, can I bet on like the worst possible
on the Clippers? Yeah.
Short the Clippers next year. I'm just intrigued.
I had them in our thing, Wes, of the other week of tanking, right? I mean, I had them in the maybe surprise, and I kind of had the take of like you don't actually need to have your pick to allow yourself to be terrible for a bit, and that. We're talking about some of the young guys. We can question like the nature of the second chance giving that they're doing and everything, but they're also quietly starting to try to assemble some of those, jackpot potential guys at the same time here. And, maybe a season where they're just terrible. And there is also some world, I believe, where they could theoretically keep the swaps that they have. Somebody that covers the Clippers was walking me through this at Summer League, that in theory, there's like a sweet spot between like 11 and 13 where if they had that pick, they actually still keep it next year. So, maybe there'll be some shenanigans there.
I will say this. I feel like it sounded like I was criticizing the Clippers. I think they did the right thing in letting Paul George go, right? I don't think you just re-sign a player just to re-sign the player. You don't re-sign a player just to quote-unquote not lose him for anything. And I never bought the whole idea that, the Clippers are opening up a new arena and they want to have all their stars. I'm like, if that's the number one reason why you're paying people money, that's a really bad reason. Like, I need like 3 or 4 reasons above we're opening up a new building, and that's why we're paying a star player money. But I think they did the right thing in letting him walk and clearing the books a little bit and adjusting their own timeline a little bit here. It was always going to be hard, no matter what. Whether or not you re-sign the Kawhi Leonard to the extension or not in January, to do it all in one fell swoop, right? It's really difficult to pivot like that in the NBA. It kind of happens gradually. We're seeing that now with the Warriors, right? You had to do last year the Jordan Poole for Chris Paul swap, knowing that Chris Paul wasn't a great fit, but that you got the shorter expiring contract and you got off the Jordan Poole money long term. And then a year later, you let Klay Thompson walk, and all of a sudden you've freed your caps and all these things. You start unlocking more draft picks as the years goes on. My point being, it's usually a gradual thing, and I think that's what we're seeing right now from the Clippers is we're going to start phasing out of what this era was, and they're going to start planning for what the next era looks like.
Yeah, I think it's where. All right, let's get into some takes. So here's what we're going to do. Each of us have proven a take we're going to fire off, and we're going to all just kind of react to it and roast each other probably a little bit, get into the take. Here we go. I'm starting. Let's talk about Jalen Brunson. Let's talk about the power of the friendship extension that he signed. On top of that, this is kind of also a Mikal Bridges take. Mark Stein has reported that it seems like Bridges, when he can, is going to sign a below-market early extension as well. And guys, this to me now becomes the most interesting extension of the offseason for Brunson and Bridges eventually as well. Not just because of the Knicks keeping it together, not just because of what it means for the Knicks specifically. I have now wondered what every other team thinks about this deal, and if this is going to be something we start seeing more of in this new era. Is this just a one-off with the Knicks that is a special circumstance? Is this a trend that is going to come where more guys are going to take less money, still get very well paid? It's not like Jalen Brunson is taking like a minimum extension or a mid-level extension here. He's still going to make good money on this deal. It's not like he's suddenly like lacking for funds. But he's taking money to allow these things to stay together as best as he possibly can. And now I wonder if every other team can and should go to their guys and say, hey, can you take a little less? Do us a solid, help us navigate the second apron. Otherwise, we can't keep this together. We can't win unless we do this. I really wonder if this is going to be a thing we start seeing, or is this just a one-off that is circumstantial? I think that is going to be an interesting test case of this new CBA the next couple of years.
Can we lay some ground rules? We were doing this format for the first time.
Yeah.
A take cannot begin with the words, I wonder.
Well, okay.
Tell me what you think will happen. Is this going to set a trend or is it not? I don't even know what to roast you or agree with. You're saying you wonder something. I also wonder that. You're supposed to tell me if it's which one or that one or the other one.
I think this will be more of an anomaly than a reality. I do not think most guys are going to do this. I don't. I don't think we have history in the league of guys taking less money. I don't think we have a league. Not this much less money. I don't think we have a history of guys in the league. Like, frankly, like this circumstance to me feels kind of like the Villanova Knicks thing might just be like really useful in terms of getting Jalen Brunson to take more money. I don't think like other guys have this actual deep connection with their co-stars all the time. Their agents are not aligned all the time. Even guys that are friends on other teams don't always have agents that are aligned with one another. That makes some of this, I think, difficult. I do not think we are going to see a lot of this, but I think we should. I think this is actually good for teams staying together and actually building things in the NBA. But I am skeptical that this is actually a thing most guys will agree to. And frankly, they shouldn't, maybe, because taking less money, like for your generational wealth building these guys are doing, is maybe bad. But I don't think we're going to see enough of this. Like a lot of this going forward would be my guess.
I will say that I've seen it written since the Jalen Brunson thing that the Players Association is going to be worried, and they might have to address this and look into it in terms of, hey, is this something we want to happen? I think all of this is a complete overreaction. I think the Jalen Brunson, Knicks, Villanova buddy system situation is a one-off, and I don't know that this happens anywhere else. Jalen Brunson is also a specific case in that he's a second-round pick that didn't make a lot of money on his first contract, didn't make a ton of money on that second contract. Even this is a huge raise for him. He was making, what was it, 20, 25 million a year? This is still a huge raise for him, and he took the extension, but it was a shorter-term extension. When he's a free agent in 2028, he's going to be eligible for a contract that's nearing $500 million. So he's also worked himself out on this. He will be like 31 years old or whatever at that point.
But there's so much like in the reporting that it's like, hey, like, you know, he's going to be lined for this mega deal for the Knicks in a couple of years, and it's like almost like an expectation.
Brendon, I want to know what you think about this because you and I were in Vegas, and a lot of people were speculating. All right, but what's really going on here? Because as much as Jalen Brunson will be saluted and a statue built for him by Knicks fans for taking less money to keep this team together and all this stuff, it is so unprecedented for a player to give up $113 million, which is essentially what he gave up here. That is a lot of money, no matter how you slice it. It is so unprecedented. I'm not reporting anything other than what other people around me in Vegas were wondering was, what else is going on here? Because it feels like we don't have the full story. And I would bet, given that it's the Knicks, we probably don't have the full story. I want to see if his dad got a huge raise for something around $113 million over 3 years. That's what I want to figure out. Is this all just going into a trust fund somewhere?
Rick Brunson kickbacks? Is that where we're going? Is that what we think is going on here?
I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, look, I mean, Amin El-Hassan went a little viral on Twitter from, I guess, what he said on SiriusXM along these lines that just it's the talk of Vegas in terms of like what exactly is the deal. And, you know, there's also the wrinkle of Brunson's agent is the son of Leon Rose, the president of the Knicks, right? So, you know, I think we might not know. I don't even know if it's necessarily nefarious. I believe it was. There's been a lot of people who have said, like, you know, even just being in New York and being the most marketable, famous player on the best team in the city can go a long way in terms of opportunities off the court. And, you know, I'm sure it's some combination of all of that. But I also think there's something very straightforward in terms of the, you know, way that the NBA works and some of the rules around contracts that also make this somewhat of an anomaly, the way that it all timed out, which is that Jalen Brunson will be able to be eligible for. It's the same thing Donovan Mitchell just did. We didn't freak out about it then, right? Where Mitchell could have signed a longer extension. He didn't. It wasn't quite the pay cut because it was the max, but still it was timed out to a point where now his next contract will be after he's eclipsed that 10-year mark. So there's parts of it that might feel a little conspiratorial. There's parts of it that might be never quite understood fully. And there's parts of it that make a lot of sense, flat out. I guess I fall somewhere, kind of in the middle in terms of if it'll continue. I think the other layer of it, big picture, and I'm no economist, but like NBA salaries with the new TV deal and the steady growth from the last TV deal to now this one, you're talking about 20 plus years or so of like pretty consistent 10% raises on the salary cap and everything else. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but it feels like NBA contracts are growing a lot faster than any sort of monetary anything in the world. You know what I mean? Inflation or just the natural trend of dollar change, value changing over time and all that. Like, we will get to a point where guys are like, I genuinely have no need for the maximum possible amount of money that my contract can be worth. When you're talking about Jason Tatum being a 60, 70 plus $1 million player on the extension he just signed. Like, it wasn't that long ago, max players were getting in a full contract, what these guys are getting in 1 year now.
Yeah.
At some point, that's going to switch people's thought process of like, yeah, I'll take $10 million less on 1 year of a deal if it sets our team up or sets me up in all these different ways. Because what really is the difference with some of this, big picture? I know you're talking about generational wealth. Last I checked, if you make $50 million a year, you get generational wealth. If you make 40, you're probably still doing pretty good. So yeah, I do think we might see it more.
And to Chris's point earlier also, whether or not teams are going to start asking for this to happen, which I think is what the Players Association is worried about. But I don't think anybody
teams should.
Yes, you should, and it doesn't mean that the player will. But isn't that all part of the negotiation? This whole idea that we lived in this NBA world where if you were kind of good, if you hit some sort of weird threshold, if you scored 22 points per game or something, you just automatically got slotted into the max. I don't know another sport that worked like that. Every other sport negotiates a contract, right?
There's no max in football like that. But
sure, but
quarterback, it's like you're going to get more than the last guy.
And the NFL.
That's the point is that
in the NFL also, the other thing with the NFL that I think that it makes the NBA like a hard comparison for like any other sport is that like the NFL, like you see guys like they get like paid out bonuses to create cap room and like spending flexibility.
Right.
So, like they still get their money.
There's ways to work around it, and in the NBA, it's a little bit harder. And the second apron now is basically a hard cap. The Players Association got swindled by letting the owners call it anything other than a hard cap, but that's essentially what it is. It's a hard cap, and within this new hard cap world, teams are going to have those negotiations. And I think we're seeing test case like Brandon Ingram right now. Brandon Ingram is the exact kind of player who just got the max the last few years. I don't think he's getting this extension that he wants.
No,
this max extension. And I think when he becomes a free agent next summer, he's not going to get paid the max because teams can they can't pay these guys the way they used to pay them anymore. And I think we're going to enter a world in the NBA now where it does start to look a little bit more like these other sports. Yeah, you do have these max contracts, but we used to live in a world where it was like max or mid-level exception, and that was sort of your range in salaries. And now there's going to be room to negotiate in the middle of that, where if you're somebody like Jalen Brunson, who's obviously a max player, you can leave it up to you, and you could say, hey, let's get into a room with the owners, with the general manager, and say, what's possible within this new hard cap world? If I take X amount of dollars less, even what LeBron just did, I know he only took $3 million less of whatever it was, but he didn't get the max because it helped his team create that flexibility that they needed. It worked for the Lakers, right? What the pay cut that he took. Bam Adebayo just now at Miami took an extension this year instead of waiting a whole year so that he can enter free agency a little bit earlier, the way that we just saw Jalen Brunson do. And he might have given up money by doing that because if he had made an All-NBA team or won Defensive Player of the Year, he would have been in line for like $60 million more than what he ultimately got on this extension. So I think there's a lot of things at play here, and I think this is going to be overall good for the players and for the league. because if we have more wiggle room in these negotiations, that's all this is. We don't have to make it some big like, oh my God, what does this mean for the Players Association? Should or shouldn't players be taking pay cuts? They're all in control of whatever they want to do. Just let them do it. If Jalen Brunson wants to take less money to help his team and help his own chances to win a championship, if that's what he prioritizes, let him do it. I don't think that needs to be some big take from that.
No,
you know?
I agree with that. I think the last thing I would say about this is I think the other part of this take that I think will ultimately benefit more players is that if more guys do this, I think that's better for the middle class of the league because there's just more money available to those guys. And I think we could already see a world where those guys get screwed out of contracts a little bit, screwed out of money they could have made. I mean, we didn't see a full mid-level. I still don't think we've seen a full mid-level signing this summer. Teams are going to...
Yeah, that's the part I'm a little bit skeptical of is like, does that money actually go back to...
Or do teams just not spend it? That would be a question.
I doubt that if a player is taking a pay cut, the team would be like cocky enough to just say, thank you, we'll keep that in our pockets, But
True.
I do think like in the Knicks situation, that money really went to the difference in Mikal Bridges' salary versus the guys that got sent out. OG Anunoby getting a big extension, using the mid-level on DiVincenzo last year, being able to keep Randall on the roster rather than having to dump him in a pick somewhere else, things like that. They didn't go out and use this to get somebody on like the taxpayer mid-level or anything like that yet. It was just the like breathing room basically is what he afforded them. Whereas, maybe sometimes, like you won't lose access to the mid-level and all that stuff. I really feel like the place we saw the cap squeeze play out, or I guess the lack thereof this summer, is a lot of guys who I think could have, or maybe in previous summers would have been minimum players, getting just a touch above that. That feels like the chain, and maybe I'm looking at it from, paying attention to all those players because that's all the Suns could get, and so I had my eye on them. But, Andre Drummond as one example, Chris Dunn as one example. There were some guys who were able to get $4 or $5 million with cap space, with exceptions, rather than having to just take $2 or $3 million. And maybe that's somewhere where it could show up. And that's not a huge league-changing trend, but that's prolonging the end of a player's career in a way, because kind of once you get to that I'm taking a minimum point, it's usually over. So there is something to be said for that if that's one of the effects of that top end player not getting as much or not taking as much, or teams like the Pelicans playing hardball, is maybe they can outbid somebody and it doesn't just turn into 20-30% of free agents every summer just ending up as minimum guys.
Let's also not act like this is the first guy to ever take a pay cut. Tim Duncan was doing this for years.
No, I think it's just notable within the structure of this CBA.
Sure,
I think
it is. And
that's
exactly
what's notable.
I think we're seeing a lot of changes happen with the CBA, and a lot of teams just get smarter about how they spend money. And I think we started this in the summer of 2016 when a bunch of teams gave up a bunch of money to a bunch of players who didn't deserve all that money, and then they realized, you know what? Just because the cap is going up, it doesn't give us just like carte blanche to just pay guys a ton of money that they don't deserve.
NBA teams are using a budget for the first time, it feels like.
Exactly.
Honestly.
And that's why you see somebody like Paul George walk away for nothing. It's why Jalen Brunson and the Knicks work together to figure this thing out under the hard cap and all these things. So if teams just get smarter about how they spend money, I think it's going to be fine, and players are still going to have their empowerment and all this stuff that they've worked for, because it was, at the end of the day, Jalen Brunson's decision to take less money. That's just as much empowerment as it is LeBron James deciding to switch teams and all these things. It's the player taking his future under control, just controlling his own future and saying, you know what? The championship, the flexibility for the team, the Knicks, all this stuff is very high on my priority list, and that's what matters to me, and that's why I made this decision.
All right, Wes, your time.
My take?
Your take.
All right. So we were there in Vegas, and Brendon, you were there for the Reed Sheppard clinic that he put on, correct?
Yep.
All right. I hate overreacting to basically 2 summer league games.
Oh boy, here we go.
But Reed Sheppard is Houston's point guard of the future. We're here. It's done. Let's do it. Let's move it along. And if it means you got to trade Jalen Green, go ahead and trade Jalen Green before you have to sign him to a rookie extension. Reed Sheppard is awesome. He's a perfect fit for the Houston Rockets. He's a perfect fit for exactly what they want to be doing and how they want to build. His feel for the game is such a high level. His shooting is elite already. I think defensively he does a ton of really interesting, smart things. He had 3 blocks in that game. He had a couple of pick sixes. I mean, this guy, his feel for the game is at such a high level already. And I think about what the Houston Rockets are doing. If they're going to build around Alperen Sengun, he's the perfect point guard next to Sengun, right? He's between like both of their feel for the game. That's how you want to build. If you're going to build a high feel roster around Shepard and Sengun, it's a really easy way to kind of plug the pieces in around those 2 guys. Whereas the Jalen Green Sengun build has been really clunky, as we know, well documented.
Yeah.
Jalen Green basically plays better when Sengun's off the court. Sengun plays better when Jalen Green's off the court. We all know all this already. They hit a home run with this Reed Sheppard pick. I loved, and part of this is me also just really liking Reed Sheppard in the pre-draft process. So this is not entirely just based off of 2 summer league games, but he's already too good for summer league. And I think if you're the Rockets, you got to be ecstatic about this, and you've got to be planning long term. Like, okay, how do we get this guy not only in our rotation, but basically build around him and our other star?
I mean, I would just say notably with the Jalen Green thing as a point of data point in the Rockets build here. You know, Sengun's not getting the extension either, and that's a whole other discussion, I think. But Green is not expected to get one before the start of next season. They're not like in the where we've seen Cade and Scotty Barnes, and it seems like Evan Mobley's next. Like the top of that draft class kind of just got extended, and I think for a good reason. Like Green is not getting that, and if that means you're really making room for a Shepard over the next couple of years as you build this out and probably add more veteran talent, because I know that's what we want Houston to do, makes sense to me. So I like this take.
So let's talk about Jalen Green first. He's not getting an extension, and he's not necessarily in their plans because he hasn't been good enough.
Exactly.
It's not because necessarily they want to have room for anybody. It's that Jalen Green in and of himself, like the fact that they even drafted Reed Sheppard in the first place is because Jalen. So, you know,
and the moment he signs
order
that
of
extension,
operations
it's like
wise,
good luck moving Jalen Green if you just gave him the rookie max right now. Like good luck finding a way to trade.
Well, yeah, rookie max maybe, but I think to Wes's point in the last segment, if you can lock him in on something less than that, I think he could still have trade value.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But in terms of their build, while we're on that topic, a lot of people have been raising an eyebrow about why Alperen Sengun's available recently. Like, why is he even being discussed in a random Woj report about trading for Jimmy Butler or Kevin Durant or all these things? Actually, I think Windhorse is the one who mentioned Sengun off of what Woj originally said, which is that they're big game hunting. It's kind of a sub-take off of yours, Wes. I think the reason that they might not value Alperen Sengun is because they never intended to be a team built around Alperen Sengun.
Right.
They've had top 5 pick after top 5 pick after top 5 pick. None of them looked, played like, had anything to do with the style and the substance of Sengun's game. I think that they kind of fell backward into this question of if they should build around him because he just took off and got better, and they had this extra pick later in the lottery that worked out for them. So it's a fascinating wrinkle because I agree that like Shepard, for instance, feels perfect as a co-pilot there with Sengun coming off of dribble handoffs, playing a little bit of, like short roll passing, spray out to shooters and cutters type of offensive game. But when Sengun went down, as we all talked about down the stretch of the season, they looked a little different and just as good, if not better, with Jabari Smith at center. Almost all of their other pieces feel like this whole other kind of team. Does Shepard's arrival make it easier to build around Sengun and kind of who I think is clearly should be the centerpiece of their team? Or does it kind of make that split even tougher on them and have almost these 2 separate paths that they are choosing from, where it's like Shepard and Sengun and, maybe like Van Vliet and Brooks. And then over here, it's like all the athletic dudes that they've taken separate from that. And It's going to be really interesting once push comes to shove in the season of who's getting minutes, how are they playing, what does it all look like, because I don't think they know. I don't think they have a plan.
And that's the great thing about Reed Sheppard. He fits into both plans, right? He fits into both sort of builds. If he's the pilot of a 5-out team that has Jabari Smith at center, and maybe the Rockets look at what the Celtics are doing and they said, you know what? We want to be more Celtics than Nuggets. Okay, cool. Reed Sheppard fits into that build just fine. Jalen Green still has a tough time kind of fitting into either one of these versions, right? He's not a great defensive player. He's an inefficient offensive player. I think he could be very good somewhere in a role, maybe a 6-man role, something like that. Might just be what he ends up being. But it's a really tough thing to do with the guy that you just took number 2 overall or 3 overall, whatever he was, a few years ago, and then you're going to ask him to get demoted. It kind of feels like that sort of thing happens after a change of scenery for a player, right? Where the team that drafted him no longer has him, and he goes somewhere else and kind of has to eat that humble pie a little bit. But I think Shepard fits both versions of this. And to your Şengün point also, I don't know how much I buy the reporting that he's actually available or anything. The reporting around the Suns Rockets situation has been all over the place, to say the least.
Brendon's just quiet, like little small smirk, and the shaking of his head is all anyone needs to know about. I think that was great.
Right. I think Brendon would be very happy if you ended up getting Şengün in Phoenix. I think that's like right up your alley in terms of the kind of player you'd want to watch and the team that you cover build around. But
I know you weren't on the show back then, but I thought Şengün had an all-star case this year. I think he is so good and better defensively than like his kind of archetype would maybe make you think. Like, he is totally worth building around, in my opinion.
And that's the thing, right? Is we always talk in the NBA like this is the kind of team you want and this is the kind of star that you would want. Very rarely do you get to choose your own superstar. Sometimes your superstar chooses you, right? Nikola Jokic was not the superstar the Nuggets planned on having. And by the way, I don't think that just because Şengün looks a little bit and acts a little bit and smells a little bit like Nikola Jokic,
smells.
That you start comparing him to Nikola Jokic.
No, he's like a better Sabonis, more like, in my opinion.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Even if you're not Jokic, we have seen centers like this be very successful in the NBA, right? Even if he's not a future MVP, there's still the archetype, there's still a prototype where, hey, you could build around this kind of player. And if Şengün can be better defensively than Sabonis, and I agree with you on that point, Brendon, that he can be a little bit better than what he's been labeled as so far, then you need to start figuring out what this looks like. And Jabari Smith Jr. is fine. You can have him. You can have Thompson. You can have Şengün. To me, their issue has always been who's in the backcourt. And Jalen Green just hasn't been the right fit. And I think you could probably trade him, and you could probably trade him now. And I don't know what you would get for Jalen Green. I don't know what team is out there that needs Jalen Green. But if you move on from him, you've got Fred VanVleet with a team option next summer. You can decide you could do anything you want with that, depending on what Reed Sheppard looks like as a rookie. You could bring him back. Those two guys work together in the backcourt just the same as they work without each other. I don't know, man. The Reed Sheppard as a piece here just fits so much better no matter what direction Houston goes in. So I'd be building around him, and I don't think you can afford. They are so loaded with all these young guys and all these rookies and all these players that they're trying to find playing time for, but I don't think they can afford to just let Reed Sheppard hang out on the bench as a rookie.
No, yeah, Houston,
not at all.
Houston to me, it's not just the reporting before the draft that made me think Şengün is this odd man out in some ways. Ime Udoka, we're talking about his defense. Udoka multiple times last season called Şengün out over his defense. I think there were times where on the record he said he is not a very good defender right now and teams will go after him, which is just a strange thing to do. I mean, I know it's Ime Udoka, he does that stuff, but that kind of caught my attention for sure.
Yeah, even as Brendon, as a data point, it's like if you think about what Şengün is, and we think about the one time we saw Udoka coach before this, he is not at all the kind of defensive center that he had in Boston. And some of that is like how Boston was built before he got that job, but it's like it's probably had something to do with what he wants to do. That's is a data point in us understanding what Udoka's kind of thinking about.
My question with the Rockets is that if Şengün's not the best player on the next great Houston team, who is? Right? They don't have another really close 1B of this rebuild, and you just say, well, we're building around that guy. You know, like I've heard people say, well, Jabari Smith Jr. or Alperen Şengün, like they seem to be better with each other off the court as well. It's like, well, I know which of those players is better. I'm sorry. Jabari Smith Jr., from the minute we saw him at Auburn, had a very high floor in his translation to the NBA, and in my opinion, a relatively low ceiling because his athleticism's not crazy. He can't create his own shot, all the rest. So they don't have that clear-cut other guy. That's kind of why I think they just have to go with Şengün. But to go back to Shepard, Wes, I have another sub-take off of yours, which is that I think I want to bounce this off of you guys. I think it's easier, and it goes back to actually the last take too. It's a little easier to be a small guard in the NBA right now than we give it credit for based on NBA history. We have this whole thing of injuries and everything else, but when I look at how Chris Paul's been able to prolong his career and Kyrie has thrived and the rise of Brunson and, maybe Shepard's never going to be an MVP candidate like you could say all those three guys were, or at least all NBA. But with how much everything is spaced out and the size and athleticism at all the other positions, I just think it's easier to maximize what a player like that can be on offense and hide what they aren't on defense in a way where watching him at Summer League, I'm like, yeah, he can kind of create his own shot with just some deceleration, some kind of stop-start, pivot foot stuff where all of a sudden he's just rising for a jumper. And I'm like, I can see that translating because you're going to play close to 5 out on that Rockets team, and we've seen so many players buck that trend where it's not Isaiah Thomas's career falling apart in his early 30s, either Isaiah Thomas, whichever one you want to pick from. But guys kind of can do this now. I think we're in a different era, and we kind of have to reconfigure that somebody like Shepard can thrive.
Especially if you're an elite shooter the way that Shepard projects to be at the NBA level. And defensively, he does stuff, right? You might still, because of his size, he's going to be taken advantage of when he gets ISO'd against and all these things. That's just going to happen. But you make up for it with steals, with those kinds of turnovers. Like I said, the pick sixes, he's able to jump these passing lanes and finish at the other end. That's sort of how you start to make up for some of the deficiencies you have defensively. High feel. I think that's one of the things that we miss a lot in the scouting portion of all this. It's really easy to look at a guy like Ron Holland and be like, 6'8" athlete, I want that guy in my roster. It's like those are the tangible things. The intangibles are harder to measure, but when you watch Reed Sheppard play, you're like, this dude just knows how to play basketball. He knows what he wants to do. He makes quick decisions. He has an elite skill set, whether it's the three-point shooting or the ball handling, whatever you want to take. He's just a really good basketball player, and I think that his ceiling is probably higher than people give it credit for. So that's the end of my take. Brendon, you had a rookie take.
I did. The player that I am going to talk about is currently plus 4,000 to win Rookie of the Year at BetMGM. But, after a bad college basketball season followed by a bad draft, we are now headed toward a bad Rookie of the Year race, right? Think back to Malcolm Brogdon and Dario Saric, and could 30 games of Joel Embiid win this thing? We're in that territory right now. I think that Bub Carrington is going to win NBA Rookie
Let's
of the Year.
fucking go. Let's go. I love this. I love the spice. I love going for like the hooper. Like I love the.
That's who wins it, right?
Buckets.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's who wins these things. Typically, is the guy who can accumulate box score stats. And Carrington, I watched him in that Atlanta game that I mentioned on the first night of Summer League. He was at 19 points, 8 assists, 9 rebounds, just 3 turnovers, 50% from the field, 50% from 3, got to the line, was making defensive plays, was playing on and off the ball on offense. Second game, which was against the Rockets, we were just talking about, his 2-point efficiency, he was 1 of 6, but the threes were still going in on a high volume. He piled up the rebounds and assists at a pretty similar rate. And you look at Washington, this is honestly the biggest case. I don't think he's going to be the rookie we think is the best. I don't think I'm predicting him to be, a superstar by any means, but they have not re-signed Tyus Jones. Say what you will, they're kind of stuck with Jordan Poole. We all get that, but that's only one player, as many shots as we know he is going to take. Kuzma doesn't really play the same position, doesn't really play with the ball in his hands. Coulibaly, Sarr, those guys are not really going to dominate possessions much. So if he's like the second most prolific usage guy when he's on the court behind Poole, or maybe third behind Kuzma, that's still a lot more opportunity than a lot of this list is going to get. And the fact that when he does have the ball and he does have those opportunities, it might go pretty well. I think he's going to play more than Shepard, who we just talked about. I think he's going to have the ball more than a Sarr or a Risa Shea or a Stephon Castle or these types of guys. So, I mean, if Carrington was starting by the end of the season for Washington as they just shut everybody down and start tanking, and he's putting up 20 and 10 games and 40-point game out of nowhere or something, I think that could be a pretty interesting case when you add all of that up, and the fact that he looks pretty ready for this, more than a lot of other guys in this rookie class did at Summer League. Plus 4,000. I'm just saying, good bet. But I actually do believe it, not just from an odds standpoint.
I like it. If you wanted to even go maybe even spicier, you could even say that he's going to be the Wizards' best rookie or the best player they take in this draft. You know, we can go in all those sort of directions. He reminds me a little bit of what Jaime Jaquez Jr. was in last year's draft. Their games aren't necessarily the same, but they do both eat up space well, right? They're not really. You look at him, you're like, okay, it's 2024. You take a lot of mid-range shots. You don't get to the basket as much as maybe we'd want. The 3-point shot is a little shaky.
Yeah.
But I do like that I know what I'm getting from Bub Carrington. That he's going to walk into the NBA and he's going to be a mid-range master. He's going to he's going to get to his spots. He's got that. He's got a long body, high release point. He's going to be able to get that shot at the NBA level. And if he's consistent, and for a Wizards team that's going to say, well, it's not like we're like in chock full of efficient shooters on this roster. He's going to have a chance to go out and play his game. I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. To your point, Brendon, I love the take. I like Bub Carrington a lot going into the draft. You started hearing from like the people who were plugged in, like in the scouting world, that he might be the biggest swing guy in the draft in terms of if you're looking for a home run, sort of in the middle of the first round. That's the name that kept popping up was Bub Carrington. And I like the Wizards taking him. I like them making that swing. And that's why I kind of was joking, but only kind of half joking. There's a world where he ends up being the best guy they took in this draft.
This year, I think he will get the most hype and attention because Sarr is such a project, you know. But, yeah, I mean, Sam Vecini had interviewed Carrington and was kind of on this whole idea that he played point guard at a younger age, didn't play point guard, and then kind of has only recently started to do that. But you look at his college stats, he was a pretty low turnover player for a freshman on a bad team. You look at Summer League, he was a relatively low turnover player in the games that he's had. He just looks more comfortable than his age. I think his stock is going up still. And yeah, we talked about Washington's lack of options. They're gonna let him do as much as he can, as much as he can handle. He's gonna get. What are they gonna? They're gonna tell Jordan Poole to take the ball from him? No, Jordan Poole's not anybody's long-term plan.
Well, to your
know
point,
what I mean?
I think it's going to be hard to take him off the court for them.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of guys they have that do what he does. And if he's a reliable bench scorer, it's just going to be really hard to take him off the court and limit his
I wonder if that's part of why they didn't make him. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with Tyus Jones, but I wonder if that's kind of why he's still sitting out there.
So just to look at the odds from BetMGM right now, I think it speaks to just how volatile the betting of this is going to be this year and how chaotic it's going to be. I mean, Zach Edey opened, I think, at plus 900. He's not the favorite at plus 600 based on how he's played at Summer League. Sarr's at plus 700. Reese Shea is at plus 800. Dalton Connect is at plus 900. Seven Castles at plus 1,000. Reed Sheppard is at plus 1,100. Buzelis is at plus 1,200. Ron Hollins plus 1,400, Cody Williams at plus 1,500, Klingon at plus 1,800 is one that I would kind of be enticed by, just if he like gets a double and plays well. I know they have a lot of centers, but like Carrington, for instance, is at plus 4,000. From like a betting perspective, I don't understand how he's behind Jared McCain, who's at plus 3,500, or even like Dillingham's at plus. Yeah, or like exactly. Dillingham's plus
any Morey rookie people think is double as good as he might actually be.
Okay, that's fair. So I like
Ricky Council, the guy that they signed last year, and he's at Summer League again. People are, if you listen to some Sixers fans or even NBA fans, it's like he's about to be an all-star, and he was on a two-way last year. You know, so that's
how people talk about it.
Thing.
There are random guys like that. People talk about Amani Bates like that, and like the amount of like Amani Bates like muscle watch posts I've seen in my particular like Cleveland-centric feed the last couple weeks has been astounding.
Well, I will tell you, having seen him at Cox Pavilion as up close as you can possibly be, he has not gained any muscle.
Okay, he said he's trying to get to 210. He's trying to get to 210 before the start of the season, apparently, and I'm just like, okay, you don't look like you weigh like more than like 180 pounds at your frame, so weird stuff.
Yeah, not as big as Adonis Arms, huh?
No, nobody is.
Best name.
You got the name. Yeah, your floor of weight is just set in stone.
Wes, if you had to pick,
the gods are helping you keep where you want to be.
If let's go, Brennan's on the Carrington train. I think we can come back to this throughout the year and like track this. as like a thing. Who are you going to stake your claim on?
I feel like just to be on brand, I might as well just stick with Reed Sheppard here.
Okay, I think you have to. I'm not taking. Hey, I'm gonna go Klingon. I'm gonna be really boring. You know what? Actually, let's go Rob Dillingham. Let's just say I'm just gonna speak Rob Dillingham being awesome for the Wolves' the new existence. That's gonna be the guy I ride with. I don't even connect it. I know it's like a Lakers thing, but him at plus 900 is just like hilarious for a guy that like might play in the G League. So I just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? All right, Wes, you got a question for us?
So, part of my Las Vegas experience, usually when I go to Las Vegas for work for Summer League, it's a lot of Thomas and Mack Center chicken tenders and hot dogs and coffee and things like that.
Did you get a blizzard? Did either of you get a blizzard?
No, I did not. Was I supposed to?
The one year I went to Summer League, there was like a debate with the people I was with for one of the days whether you get Dippin' Dots or the blizzard. Brad Rowland
That's crazy.
Yeah, Brad Rowland, Bill the BD Filippo Psychos got Dippin' Dots, and the blizzard's the move.
Brendon, do you agree or disagree with that? That's
Dippin' Dots are my move.
No way.
Between those two options.
Come on.
What are we doing? Well,
I love it, but it's more like a supply and demand thing. Like, where are you ever that you can buy Dippin' Dots? That's not like
but where do you?
So I would just get it for the novelty of it.
Yeah, but where do you even want to eat Dippin' Dots? You want like your tongue to burn? Like, I don't understand.
I'm just generally out on Dippin' Dots as a concept, and I think it sounds like Chris is too.
Yeah.
The Blizzard Dairy Queen is undefeated, or the Dairy Queen Blizzard is undefeated, so I'm taking that every single time with Reese's and chocolate ice cream. I go double chocolate, a little bit of peanut butter. That's the move. Not my question though, because I did not eat anything at the arena. Instead, I brought my wife with me this year, and she had picked out some restaurants. So I actually did stuff in Las Vegas this time, which was a fun little wrinkle to the whole concept of Summer League. So she found this place called Catch, and they've got a bunch of different locations. One of them is in Las Vegas. I don't know if it's the first one, but it's a very famous, popular one. Had a great meal, but a very packed restaurant. We sat at a table for two. There was a table to our left, a table to our right, and then beyond those tables, again to my left and right, to my left, 3 or 4 tables away, Pascal Siakam walked in with his group, so he was eating there. To my right was Daryl Morey and his whole group, and then behind me was Byron Scott with what looked like maybe his family or something like that. And so it was me and my wife just sort of in the middle of all this NBA stuff happening, and there was a bunch of other players and NBA people there too, but those were the ones sort of right around us. I don't want to talk about them so much, though, as I want to talk about the anonymous couple that was sitting right next to us.
Uh-oh.
I cannot stress to you enough, the food was amazing at this place, right? We got the steak, we got some sushi roll with the crab and salmon and all this stuff. We had a great meal. We had wine to pair with it. I had a red wine. My wife had a white wine or Prosecco or something like that. Next to me, this couple ordered this beautiful branzino, right? Just like that big fish where you eat it and you just eat out. Awesome, awesome order. Looked great. Brussels sprouts, the whole thing. Guy orders a glass of wine, I think. The woman, and I'm not even kidding, orders a vodka Red Bull to pair with her branzino. And that was maybe the most, only in Las Vegas would that ever happen. So I tell you that story to ask you this question. What's the weirdest food pairing combo thing that you do?
Oh.
That might be a guilty pleasure or whatever it is. It could be a dipping pizza and ranch type of thing. It could be a completely just specific to Chris and Brendon type of deal. But what's your weird food thing? I'll go first. Give you a second to think about your answers here. I have been criticized for this by many people, and I didn't realize it was weird when I was doing it. I will put salt on my pizza, and people think that that's crazy when I do it in front of them. But it's not like a ton of salt, but I will salt my pizza. So that's my answer.
I don't put salt on anything. My answer is that there's a very small counter service Mexican place kind of by the house in part of Phoenix that I grew up in that is been there as long as this suburb of Phoenix has been there. It's a community favorite, whatever, but their signature little appetizer thing is not normal chips and salsa, but instead they call it strips. So it's basically unmelted nachos. Think of the shittiest grated cheese you could buy in a bag at the grocery store, pre-grated, sprinkled on top of chips with their hot sauce on the side. And so the cheese is literally just basically sitting there. Like you could dump it off or pick it up.
Right.
It's not melted. And then you just put some hot sauce on the chip on top of like the unmelted cold cheese, eat it, and it is absolutely delicious. So that's
It's
not so
good?
much a me thing, but I figured
Well,
you guys wouldn't necessarily
does the-
relate
sounds
to
like-
it.
That sounds like
This
the
is an
pizza
everybody who
Lunchable.
goes there kind of thing. Yeah, it's sort of like a Lunchable. Sure, I mean,
does,
yeah.
Does the,
but
I mean, are
it's
you
delicious.
are you sitting outside and then is the 108-degree heat in Phoenix and like melting the cheese? Is like
That's
what's
a solid
going on?
question.
Like,
Yeah, what's the process here?
It potentially could. However, they are open in the winter, so not always.
so like when it's like 90 is what you're saying.
Sure.
I don't know how cold
But-
it gets. I don't know how cold it is in Phoenix in the winter.
Phoenix is dry, so it can get below freezing in Phoenix depending on the time of year and time of day. But yeah, so that's mine. It's called Strips, and it is cold nachos.
So this restaurant, let me get this straight, does less work in the preparation of the food, calls it something different, and sells it for the same amount of money.
God bless.
They actually do no work. The way that you get it
sounds like
is
no work.
it's cheese in a bag, chips in a container, and hot sauce on the side. So you are doing the work. They're just
It
giving
feels
you
like
the
you
ingredients.
could make that at home. I know that you don't
No,
have to
but
go
that's
full,
all. That's actually the funny
bear.
thing. One, their hot
But-
sauce is delicious because it's like an authentic. We're in Arizona. It's an
Yeah.
authentic Mexican
Okay.
place,
So
so
you
you
buy the
can't
hot
really
sauce
recreate
there.
that.
And
Yeah,
But
you get
even
hot
the
sauce from them, yeah. Okay. That's good.
Even the cheese is unique. It's something about it. You could try a million times to recreate it. You can't. You can't buy like the Sargento at the grocery store or whatever. It's not going to happen. You
What's
gotta
the name of the place?
Elmer's.
Elmer's.
Elmer's Tacos.
All right.
Yep.
Not to be confused with the glue. Got it.
Okay, I will be asking you to take me there, Brendan, when I eventually make my way out to Phoenix. We will be going to Elmer so I can have
It is not. If anyone visits Phoenix, it's absolutely not near anything you would ever be attending. But if you really want it, you can go get some cold nachos for like $3 and tell them Brendan sent you, and that won't matter to them, but
They'll be
it'll
like
matter to you.
they'll be like the host of the Just Basketball Show. We love that guy. That's what they're gonna say.
Yeah. They were like,
All right,
oh, we
Chris,
slipped
what's
him a
yours?
50 before that episode on July
Yeah, right.
15th. And yeah.
Yeah, that's right. All right. I don't think mine is. I put zucchini in my oatmeal.
That's
No, you
I make
crazy.
oat. Yes, I do.
That's a
No,
lie.
I do.
Wait,
That's
cooked
not a-
or raw?
Cooked. So I cook
For
my
what
oatmeal on the stove.
purpose?
Listen, it tastes. It's like you make zucchini bread as your oatmeal. It's great. Cinnamon. So put the oatmeal on the stove. You get it boiling. You shred a little bit of zucchini. Fills it
Oh,
up.
shredded.
Yeah.
That makes a
what'd
little
you-
more sense.
What do you think? I was like taking a fucking whole zucchini and like chucking it in the pot.
Not
That's
a
what it
whole
sounded like.
zucchini,
I
but
thought you
like
meant
a
zucchini
diced,
chunks.
like-
yeah,
Yeah,
like a
take a
diced or
zucchini.
sliced zucchini.
Yeah, I grate it up, cinnamon, and I just make like a warm bowl of like zucchini oatmeal bread for breakfast.
Oh,
Honey?
That's not as bad. Okay.
Okay.
That's
I-
pretty reasonable. I mean, it's like a
Yeah,
more nutritious option. Than
Yeah,
other
It is
Yeah.
big.
fruits.
That is a lot of prep for oatmeal, though. So,
Yeah, here's the thing. I probably take too much
Credit to
time in
you.
the morning doing this, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm like, I regret it sometimes 'cause it takes a little bit long. I have an electric stove. It takes longer to cook. I don't like electric stoves. I hate them. They're awful. They're not good to cook with. It's like the one thing Republicans right. I don't think I have like very many weird things. I'm like racking my brain to see if there's anything else I do. I guess. Do you guys salt your like when you're cooking eggs? Do you like a little flaky salt on your eggs as you're cooking them? Brendan
As
doesn't
I'm
apparently
cooking
use
them?
salt. Yeah, like I put them on there to get the little extra salt on, like, and then
I
everything
salt when
bacon
I'm
seasoning
cooking.
on
I
after.
just don't really like put salt on like people go to restaurants and they're just going. I'm not like that,
Yeah.
but I'll do it
That
when
f-
I'm
that
making
feels-
food. You gotta season
Yeah,
your food.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I'll do it
okay,
on eggs.
okay, we're
Sure.
agree. All right, trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe this will kind of maybe irritate Wes, considering I found that he's a chocolate ice cream today. I'm a vanilla ice cream guy.
That's
Just
fine.
like
I have no problem
I'm
with it.
cool. I'm cool with just eating like a little vanilla ice cream or a twist cone. I don't need much more than that.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. I'm not going to say anything bad about ice cream. Not going to get me to do
When's the
that.
last time you guys had a vodka Red Bull?
Never had one.
My wife will get them from time to time, just if she wants something a little crazier when we're out. But I don't know if I've ever had one.
Red Bull's not my flavor of thing. I don't like the smell of it. I never liked the smell of it, and I've stayed away from it ever since.
No. I think
I'd rather
had
just
it
have
in
like a whiskey
college.
and Coke or like a rum and Coke if I'm
Yeah.
trying to do that upper and downer
My-
thing.
Yeah,
you know?
ginger ale, like
Yeah,
a ginger
like
ale
a
and
whiskey
whiskey
soda
yeah.
or something. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I do think that if you are at a restaurant like I was at and you ordered a good meal and then you ordered the vodka Red Bull as your drink,
You should be
not
taken out of the
allowed to do it.
restaurant.
You shouldn't.
Yeah.
There should be an option for the waiter or the bartender or whoever is in charge of this to just say, you're not having that. Absolutely
Just
not.
smile at you and say no. Yeah,
like-
and I'll
it's
have
like
a
going-
vodka
it's like going to
soda,
the
or I'll have a
restaurant.
vodka Red Bull, and then the server just, no,
No.
you won't.
Nope. No, you won't.
They just send you a red wine and they're like, drink this, you adult. Like, be an adult.
Right.
and
Yeah.
drink
Like
this.
grow up.
You're not- you're not in a
it's like-
frat.
I
Like,
do believe.
please chill.
Right. You're not eating. What was it called? Strips. I almost had the joke.
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
landed.
That would
You're not
honestly
eating
be the
strips.
pairing. I think I found it. Yeah.
A vodka Red Bull and strips. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a
That was
vodka.
the show title.
Somebody
Vodka
somebody
Red Bull
asked me for a restaurant. A friend of the show, Sabrina Merchant, asked me for restaurant recommendations in Phoenix for WNBA All-Star Weekend, and I realized that 4 of the 7 I gave her were all like taco places. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm realizing a trend in like the places that come out of my mouth about the place that I live. But look, we are who we are.
Yeah,
And
you gotta-
sometimes
you got-
cold nachos are involved, and I do have some more classy recommendations, but those aren't that weird. This one's weird, so it fit the mold.
Very good.
I thought, Wes, when you asked this question while in here, I thought you were going to say that they were sitting on the same side of the booth.
Okay. I do have a problem with that in general.
So do I.
But that
You've
could be
never
a
done
whole-
it?
I have done it. We did it one time, actually, pretty recently, and
To be clear,
The
when it's just
reason
you and
was-
you and one other person, not like a group of people, like just a 2-person.
right,
thing.
Yeah,
no,
like
it's a group of people.
like a
you sit
date.
where you got to
Just-
sit.
Or,
yeah,
or
just-
your
yeah,
partner.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
If it's just me, my wife and I did have to sit on the same side, but it was one of those weird tables where at the restaurant, like sometimes the restaurants here in Miami can get a little too. They could be trying a little bit too hard with this stuff. Where it was a 2-person top, a 2-top. There was a chair, and then there was basically what amounted to a couch. Instead of how you get like a chair and a booth, and they're the
yeah.
same height, they did a lounge couch, like a love seat, where like these 2 different 2-tops had to share the love seat, and then there was 2 normal restaurant chairs on the other side. So we ended up sitting there, and my wife, who's obviously like already shorter than me, was like sinking into this couch, and it was like me having dinner with Victor Wembanyama. It ended up being what it looked like. So we ended up having this same side, this whole situation. We got another chair, brought it over, but generally speaking, no, I don't do it, and I don't condone it.
Okay. Just one of the
Conversation for a different time. We'll debate that a different day.
Yeah, that's on the After Dark episode. It's just debating restaurant etiquette. I think that's what we're gonna. It seems like we're ending up.
Yeah,
in.
deep
We're gonna
off-season
find
content.
deep like August when like Laura Danny Ainge is for 9 first round picks for Larry Martin. It's like, oh, that's not happening. All right, we're gonna end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. That is Brendon Kleen. Back at you later this week with more Just Basketball. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.